Welcome back, everyone, to the final section of the C# beginners tutorial, where I'm going to be going over arrays and lists, arrays/lists, and the ForEach loop. And how we're going to do this is we're going to take our existing code here and store every single attack that you do into a history list, and then at the end of the game we're going to say this is what happened during the game. So it's kind of like a replay feature. If you want to get real intense, you could say this is like the kill cam in Call of Duty, where you can see what happens before you died. But you know, it's not going to be animated and things of that nature. But this is going to be basically a replay of the whole entire game. So an array, let's say an array is a list of elements that is stored inside one kind of box thing. Like, so we have let's say if you have an int called like test, or let's call the int number, and it's 4. That number is literally 4, and that's it. It can never be anything else. But if we had a array of ints, so we call it like number list or number array, we could have an array where the first slot is 1, the second slot is 2, the third slot is 3, and we can store a huge, infinite amount of variables inside this one little container. So you take this one variable and say, hey, I have a container of all these things inside of it. So now we're going to specify this by making an int array. So int array, and array is specified by these brackets here. I'm going to call it test, or I'm going to call it int array equals new int array, semicolon. Now it's erroring here because it says an array creation must have an array size or array initializer. So in this case, we're going to give it a size of 5 elements. So when you define an array, you need to have a fixed size. So here we're saying that this array is 5 things in the array. So now there is 5 slots in this array. So now if I wanted to say int array, in the first slot, set it to 2. And then we're going to say 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So arrays count from 0. So the 0 array is the first slot. And the first slot here is technically the second slot because you're counting from 0. You don't count from 1. It's not like 1, 2, 3. You count from 0 through 9. And this is due because in programming, you can't really do 10 because 10 gets into a whole like way of handling it, like binary wise, etc. So 0 through 9 represents all the first 10 numbers without going into double digits. So 0 is technically the first slot. Then when you get to 9, you technically said 10 things, but you haven't got the double digits. So in this case, I'm setting the 0 slot, the first slot, then the second slot, the third slot, and the fourth slot, and the fifth slot to variables. Now I also then after that I set a 6th slot, even though there's only 5 things in this array, I set a 6th slot to 6. So let's try running, see what happens. So I errored, and from the previous lesson, if we hit an exception, it would just write out the exception on the screen. So you can see, oops, it says index was outside the bounds of the array. So I errored because I tried to access. This is called an array index. So give me the index with the item inside the 5th spot index wise is outside of here. So there isn't actually. This is saying there's 5 things in here, which means it goes 0 through 4, which is here. There is no 5th spot, hence why we errored. So this line was fine, this line was fine, this line was fine, fine. This line errored because we have just tried to access something like, hey, we only have 5 things in this array. Like we only have 5 slots here, and you just tried to put 6 things in. You just tried to put something in the 6th slot. Therefore, it'll crash, and it's not. It won't work. So we're going to get rid of this line here, and then you'll see that if I get rid of that, it goes to what's your name, which is our normal portion of the code. So at this point, if we wanted to access everything inside this array, or anything inside this array, we could write out the line. I'm going to say int array. I just want to know what's in the third slot. So int array 3. And since this is a counter, I typically just in my mind I just remember that if I want to know what the slot it is, I just add 1. So in the 4th slot, I want to know what's inside there, which in this case is 4. So we should see 4 written out on the screen, which we do. So that's basically arrays. Allows you to store multiple things in there, and then you can write them out. But if you wanted to loop through an array and write them all to the screen, we typically would go an array loop, and we would say the length of the array. So since we're counting from 0, this works automatically. From starting at 0 and continuing till the length of the array, which is 5, write out the number. So int array, and inside the bracket, I'm going to, instead of putting the index, I have to put the index, which is a number, and here, so I put, it's a variable, it's an int, so right now it's 0, the second time through it's 1, so it's like this. This is hard-coded, but now I'm doing it via code, and I'm going to write out every single thing inside of that int array. So we got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got 4 because I didn't remove this line, but after that you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just looped through the whole entire array and put out the words. So technically I could have 1,000 things in this array, write it out with just this line of code, and because it loops out all 1,000, and boom, they're out. So arrays are efficient. They're quick when you do things inside Unity or game programming, and you want to do something per frames. You could use arrays, but I tend to prefer to use lists just because they're easier. In my opinion, they're easier to handle. And in this case, we're going to use lists, but arrays are something you could use. You just have to remember like these ones, twos, and things of that nature. It's a little more mathematical and like hard coded. Like this is the third index, as opposed to lists, which are kind of more English based. So a list, you specify the type using these brackets. So I want a list of ints, and I'm going to call this an int list equals new int list. And basically what this does is, now this is an empty list right now that has nothing inside of it. And unlike an array, I could add things to this to this list without having a set limit defined. Like the array was like, oh, I needed 5 things exactly. Well, this one, I can add things dynamically. So this int list, I'm going to .add. I'm going to add to this list the item that we want. So now I'm going to put the 5 that we kind of showed before, the example. And then we're going to do a for loop again to the int list .count. It's called count instead of length because we're counting the list. And then console.writeLine, and I can say int list and do the exact same thing. So now we get the exact same result, except I didn't have to specify what item goes where. We're just constantly adding. And then, if for some reason I did this, now all of a sudden I have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's now 12 items outside the list, and it just prints out. So one thing else I like about lists is there's a thing that you can add here. When you use using statements, you can get certain functions. If I use system.LINQ, what that allows me to do is inside lists, I can say certain things such as give me the first item. So by doing that, I get the first one. So the first one would be this one. Give me the last, which would be this one. Give me another list where all the W's equal 4. So here it's saying get me a list, another list. It gets returned from this, so I'm going to say new list. New list. And basically this is, I just did a lot of things there without necessarily explaining it, so I'll go through it now a lot slower. But this new list, give me a list of all the areas where W equals 4, where the item inside here equals 4. So in that case, I'm only going to get a list of 2 items, being this guy and this guy. And basically that is by using .where, which was included inside the system.LINQ class or set of functions. I can give it a function parameter here, which is saying make up a variable name. It could be whatever you want. And then in that lambda expression, if W, which is the variable I had, which is the value of the thing inside of there, equals 4, because this has to be a Boolean if it's true or not, it knows to put it inside a list. This turns it into a query, and then here the 2 lists, we turn it back into a list. Now this LINQ stuff is extremely powerful and important, but this is more intermediate to advanced C#. You're not going to be doing too many things of this nature right off the bat. So since we're staying with beginner stuff, we're not going to do this. If we wanted to do this, like this where loop or where clause allows you to get this new list easily. But if I wanted to, let's say comment this out, I could loop through. I can create a list called new list, and I'm just going to create this list. And I could say inside this loop where I'm looping through every single one of those, if I said that if the number I'm on right now equals 4, then new list dot add the one I'm on right now. This would get me the same result as this one line. So you can, like, that where clause, the LINQ stuff, is just helper stuff that allows you to do stuff easier in one line faster. But you can do everything with the basics that I have taught you in C#. That's why it's the C# basics, like learning this. Like learning this, you can do anything you want inside code. Other things like this allow you to do things efficiently, like writing it efficiently, and it just makes it easier for you. But it doesn't mean you couldn't do it this way. This is 100% valid. You get the same end result as opposed to this just one line. So all that being said, what we're going to do is create a list of strings. And this list of strings is going to be game history. So I have defined the game history, and now I'm going to add stuff to the game history. So in the game loop, we're going to add a new parameter, which is a list of strings. And we're going to call this the game history list. And then I'm going to add that to the documentation comment, which is good practice. Contains the list or the list that contains the game history that we will add to. So here we're going to just modify things a little bit from the way we've done things. So here I'm going to define a list of the strings we will use to write out. So we're going to write a string initial text. We're going to say this equals all of this. And then I'm going to write out initial text. So basically I just moved everything that's inside of here. Instead of it being an inline string that only exists here, now it exists inside of a variable. Because it's in a variable, I can use this again and again. So if I go here now to console.writeLine, I just wrote it out to the screen. Now I'm going to add the string to the game history. So here we're going to say game history list dot add. I'm going to add the string to it, initial text. So now I wrote out that text, and that same exact text I just added to my history. So I have my first slot inside my list, which is this string, which is everything that we wrote out here. Now I'm going to write out, make another string variable and call this attack text. Make that null, and then a string of enemy attack text equals null. So I defined them, but they're not set at the moment. And as I spoke about in the debug session, the text is gray because it is not currently being used, and it's underscore green. It says it's assigned, but its value is never used. So if I go over here, you'll see that here we have the attack text is being written out here. You chose to attack the enemy. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to save the attack text. So I'm going to take the attack text, save it there, pop it out here, add the history. Game history list dot add attack text. So of that nature, we're going to continue to write that out to all four of these. And in this case, we write that here. Oops. You chose to defend. And then you chose to strike the enemy. And then we're going to add the history. So and then we're not going to choose something else. So now when the player gets hit here, the enemy attacked. So something I just want to kind of mention in terms of functions. I think I missed something here. Oh, I forgot to put inside game loop. I gotta assign game history list to the game loops. Now that I mean to the game loop function, because I passed it in. So now we're fine. So now we just kept a history of all our attacks, and we have now a huge list of, a string being like, hey, you encountered enemy crab, and then I chose single attack. So put the string, you chose single attack, and then it's going to say like the enemy attacked you. I'm just going to put here the enemy attacked you. Write out that the enemy attacked. Game history list to add the enemy attacked the player. So now if we go to the end of the game, which says game is over, blah. So this else here is if the player is dead. So I'm going to shrink this real fast so you can see that we come in, we define the player, we have the game loop, and then if the player is dead, then it does game over. Otherwise, we do all this if stuff. But after all that's done, either way, I want to write out the game history. So in this case, before I do that, I'm going to loop through the whole game history. So this is going to show for each loops. If you say for each, and then tab, it's going to say for each variable, and then you get the name item. So I'm going to call this history in game history. So this allows you to do that for loop that I wrote above, but it's easier because it's object based with the list. So we're saying for each history in game history. So it's just like go through this list, and every single one of them, every single history inside of game history, do something with it. In that case, I'm going to console.writeLine history, which is the string. So for every history inside game history, just write it out. So in this for each loop, simplified everything, wrote it, kind of made it in English. For every single thing inside the game history, write it out, and I want to see the game history. Beforehand, though, I should probably say, let the player know this is the history. So I'm going to say here, right line, and then in here, and N, which is the double new line area. And I'm going to say, right, this is the history of the game, and then 2 double lines. So now you can see that we play it out, and I'm going to say David, and I'm just going to do 3 strike attacks just to kind of kill them all quicker. Okay, so wow, I actually lost. Big Boss beat me up. So I'm in the middle of fighting Big Boss, and he had 36 health remaining, but he hit me for 45 damage when I had 4 health, and he actually defeated me. So I probably needed to heal during fighting the enemy crab. But then it says game over. David has died. This is the history of the game. So it says, David, you have encountered an enemy crab. You chose a 3-strike attack. The enemy attacked the player. And it kind of shows what we wrote in history. And that was it. That essentially is the end of all that, but I just want to kind of point out a little bonus thing for function-wise that is kind of important that I realized here when doing the enemy part. Here I'm just saying the enemy did something. I'm just like, oh, the enemy attacked the player. But I kind of want to know what the enemy did. Where is it? So when the player gets hit, I'm going to go to this function here that we defined in like one of the previous videos. Gets hit is right here. It kind of says, look, how much the player was hit for. We could, right now we're returning nothing from the function, but if I wanted to return an int, I could say, and then you would want to make sure you write it out inside the comment block. This returns the new health, or the current health of the player. So we can have this return the new health of the player. So now, by doing that, we could say subtract the health value with the hit value, and now we can just say return the health from this function, and we're going to return health, and now the function is returning health. So now in this case, this is running, it's returning health, it's not being stored in any variable, so it just falls off. So if I wanted to, which I'm going to do, I'm going to say the enemy attack text equals the enemy attacked the player for and the player has blank health remaining. So that's the enemy attack text, and I'm going to add that here. And since this was defined afterwards, it has to go above. So breaking it down, the enemy attack text, which is a string, is going to be the enemy attacked the player and the player has. Now the result of this function is going to be, it returns the health values. So this is going to return, let's say you have 100 health and you get hit for 2, now it's going to return 98. So when it says has here, I'm putting a space, then all of a sudden 98 is going to appear here. The player is going to get hit, it's going to do all that code and return 98, and then it comes out with health remaining. So in the enemy attack text, I just wrote out that the player has got hit for 98. I actually did attack the player, and then I added to my enemy attack history. So doing this again, all the way through, I spelled my name wrong. Oops. So doing this again, okay. So game over. David died. So David keeps getting killed by Big Boss. You have the history of the game, and you can see the enemy attacked the player, and the player has 84 health remaining. The enemy attacked the player, and he has 43 health remaining. You can actually kind of give more detail and write of that nature. So, I believe this concludes the basics of everything that I believe that you need to start a C# application. So, of everything that we've gone over, we've talked about how C# is, what C# it is, and how you use it. And we made a console app with an RPG game, which has turn-based style based off of the enemy attacks, you attack, random amounts. We talked about data types, variables, math operations, strings, objects, if statements, while loops, for each loops, switch statements, try-catch blocks for catching errors, and debugging, arrays and lists, classes, and functions. And knowing all that, you could write a C# program. Those basics is the same thing for all programming. That's not just C#. Any programming language has all those functions or those features, and it's just written in a different way. So if you were now to learn, let's say, Python, you would have to learn the only thing that's going to be different is the syntax. So this is how I write a Python if statement, or this is how I write a JavaScript if statements. It's going to be a little different. Thank you all again for watching this entire C# series. If you guys have any ideas or requests on what tutorials you would like to see in the future, leave them down in the comments below, and I will be sure to look at them and possibly make it. I do want to do a more intermediate and advanced C# tutorial section, and I'd be interested in hearing what you guys want to see in that. And I think I'm going to do how to make a Twitch extension video sometime in the future, and how to make a Unity game, like a basic Unity game, because Unity is the main engine you would want to use if you're making a game, because it's free and it's good. There's also Unreal Engine, but I'm not too familiar with Unreal Engine. I know Unity. But thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a nice day.